Welcome to the fourth episode of the Peeples Exchange, where business meets education. Today, we're going to talk about showing up boldly and what that means and looks like in our everyday lives. So if you're a small business owner, a community leader, or just a member of the community looking to learn more about how to step boldly in your purpose, this is going to be that episode for you.
All right. I'm Regis Peeples. I lead the community enablement and academic division of our company. That includes educational coaching, curricular development and audits, and also inclusivity trainings and developing programs for trainings. Maybe you might want something asynchronous or video module, or maybe you're interested in an in-person training. We can coordinate on either one of those avenues in that regard.
Awesome. Thanks, Regis. My name's Keara Peeples. I lead the growth marketing and client loyalty division of our company. I help small business owners attract and retain their ideal level customers through online and offline strategies. So just so you all know, on our podcast, we don't only discuss business topics, but we also talk about community and education topics in this blended form podcast. So really happy to have you all here watching and or listening today. Regis, do you want to kick off the opening question?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to talk about here, when have you shown up the boldest in your career or space that you occupy?
That's a great question. I would love to answer that with an example of when I was in corporate. Now, obviously, I run this growth agency, and I'm also a realtor here in Los Angeles. So I am an entrepreneur and I am a business owner. But before this venture of mine, I was working in the software revenue space as a senior enterprise client outcomes manager. I was working at a company. We won't give any names here, but essentially at this point in time, the economy was fluctuating. It was so crazy. And I just felt like I wasn't being essentially paid enough I wasn't being paid enough. I wasn't being paid what I wanted to make at that point in time. Now, I consider what I did bold because of that time in itself, right? It was a fluctuating time. I think it was around COVID, right? And so a lot of businesses didn't know what their tomorrow was going to look like, what their next quarter was going to look like, because we were all dealing with this very unique issues. We're indoors, right? Like everything's changing, everything's shifting. Like we can't do the day-to-day things, and our day-to-day operations are going to look very different. And at that point, I wasn't making what I wanted to make. And so I did tell my boss, like, hey, I know right now is a weird time, but I do feel and I do think that I deserve a raise. And I had all my information. I would never say ask for a raise when you're just because you want one, right? Like, don't just ask for a raise because you just want to make more money. Like everybody wants to make more money. But when you finally are at that point where you feel like you deserve it and you have a strong case, gather all your data, ask to speak to your boss, prepare them for what you're going to discuss and say, hey, this is what I want to discuss with you. And so we had that conversation. And unfortunately, at that point, I think with him just being the gatekeeper and just what was going on at that time, unfortunately, it was just kind of one of those things like, sorry, no one's getting a raise, this year. Just look at it as job security. We don't know what's going on right now. But yeah, you're not going to get that raise. And I'm like, you sure? Like, there's nothing that can be done about this. Essentially told me in a very tactful way, like, if you don't like it, leave. And I was just thinking, why would I be told that when I'm the number one person on the team closing the most deals? Now, the complexity of that situation at that time is we had a solution, but then we were acquired and we had to essentially sell the new solution to existing customers that didn't ask for a new solution. And I was the number one closer on my team at that time. And so I'm thinking, well, why would you want me to go somewhere? No, obviously this information is coming down from someone above him, right? Trying to, kind of keep that distance between my raise and kind of what was going on behind the scenes, right? Yeah. So I didn't take it personal, but I did let my boss know, you know what? I understand, like, there's only so much you can do, but I want to talk to our COO. We had a meeting. I prepared a very persuasive presentation about why I deserved a raise, despite everything that was going on, right? I advocated for myself to someone that could literally fire me on the spot, right? Yeah. And fortunately, I was given a raise. Boldness to me was just advocating for myself, knowing what I deserve and not being afraid to ask for it, despite the risks that are involved sometimes with that. So that's one example from me. I'd love to learn more about you. What's the time that you showed up boldly in your career or the spaces that you occupy?
And thanks for sharing your story. I love to hear, someone advocating for themselves. For me, when I first started teaching, I noticed that there was a bit of a lack of diversity when it came to literature, poetry, and just the different kinds of arts that were occupying the curriculum. I was working at an art college, a really great school, by the way. But I just felt like we were only teaching a particular aspect and element of art from specific parts from around the world.
Okay.
I would say that it was mostly focused on Western Europe, ancient canonical Greece, the United States, but we never really touched on, any Native American poetry necessarily, or art or paintings or sculptures. But long version short, there was just a lack of inclusivity and diversity. So first, I just started adding in supplemental assignments. Okay, we're going to learn about this very canonical, Western European, Eurocentric work. And then I'm going to throw in some examples of other people who are from different cultures or parts of the world who took those things and those tools and made them into something else. And then I decided, hey, this isn't really enough for me. I think I want to develop a course. So I created this new class. The objective of the class was to look at poetry from each of the different continents, make sure everyone's included.
Yeah.
All right. And one of my coworkers once made a joke and said, even Antarctica? Yes. Even Antarctica. Because
I want to know more about Antarctica. Like,
look,
what's going on there?
northern tundra. People walked around
Why
there.
is it so
People
cold?
look, so but on a serious note, and so I was like, hey, look, man, we gotta switch this up. So I started with supplemental assignments, and then I proposed a course that had to do with looking at each continent, keeping sort of the same premise of the class, but really just exploring South America, North America, looking at Africa, looking at Asia, looking at
Nice.
different parts of native and indigenous Australian works, right? The Aboriginals and things of that nature, and really reframing the conversation to be all inclusive. So, what do sculptures look like in all these different places and why? What does poetry look like in all these different places and why? How
Yeah.
did these people use their art to communicate with one another, and what was the goal of it? What were the tools being used to do?
Okay.
And then that slowly turned into me, proposing this course.
Mm.
The college, in fact, great school, by the way, decided to let me know that my class would be too hard.
Oh, wow.
They wanted
Okay.
there to be a focus and a concentration. I guess their focus was mostly on the Eurocentric aspects. And so
Did they say that it would be too hard or too difficult? Was it just because you're teaching more cultures than just a few, or just like what was the reason?
it was more so, yes, too many cultures. We need to focus and concentrate on the art because the primary focus of the programs at that college is basically technical development. So they want you to refine your skills
Okay.
and refine your craft, and they picked certain elements
I
and
see.
aspects that they
Okay.
felt were the best representations of those technical skills.
Got it. Okay.
Which to me is problematic in its own sense because, obviously those things are
How are those
relative.
things chosen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
those things are relative. Who gets to decide, well, this is the best way to approach bronze sculpting or a bronze,
Mm-hmm.
finished bust of someone and so on and so forth. So the class was declined, said it was too complex,
I see.
too many things to focus on. So I redesigned the course to focus only on poetry. I made sure to touch each continent, and I designed the course so that we looked at, okay, what is this poetry being used for? How do these people in modern and ancient times using their work, and how did that evolve over time? What can we unpack from the poetry that emphasizes and highlights what this community finds important or topics that they think are important? Because, poetry is used as not only a tool for activism, but also a form of storytelling and a preservation of history.
So it sounds like you eventually got the course approved.
Mhm.
You talked about just kind of dealing with that process,
Yeah.
but still pushing through. And to me, that is a testimony of how you showed up boldly.
hmm
Now, what was the impact of this course for your students or for your colleagues at that time?
We have students from all around the world, and it feels great when you're in a class and you have people from all these parts of the world, and you're also teaching about their history and culture.
Yeah.
But also, it helps us to see, or it helps the students and faculty to see the intersection between the cultures.
Yeah.
Those things transcend the separation that we create amongst ourselves when we identify, if
I
that
love
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
So it's something that makes the classroom even more inclusive, gives visibility to different cultures in different parts of the world, but also just shows how similar we all are as a way to sort of foster more community and less hate and discrimination, I would say, or even elitism.
That's a good point because, and thank you for sharing, and just all of your great knowledge that you have to share. Regis is a genius. Um, you
Mm.
are. No, it's always great and fun to pick your mind and to hear your perspective as an educator
Yep.
in the space. Now, on that note, you talked about elitism and things of that nature. I'd love to shift the conversation from the examples of what it could look like to show up boldly in business and
Hmm.
education with us, our personal stories, but what are some blockers when it comes to showing up boldly in academia and education? And then I'll share some when it comes to business as well. But, because showing up boldly, we can say that and it sounds good in theory and it sounds good as music to our ears, right? But there are complexities that come with showing up boldly in our day to day lives. So, what does that look like in your space?
In academia, a few roadblocks include one, credentials.
Okay.
Credentials are super important, obviously. There's nothing wrong with having credentials. Credentials provide us with evidence that someone has a skill set.
Mm,
However, in the case of learning, I would argue that there's just a bit of elitism.
okay.
Doctors are perceived as one type of way, whereas someone with a bachelor's degree is perceived as another type of way, or someone with a master's degree. There's this whole hierarchy, which I completely understand. I'm in the space, I have multiple degrees myself,
Mm,
but I don't believe that having a particular level of education determines if you're effective at teaching or
mhm.
if you're going to be impactful when it comes to fostering a different community, motivating students to go out and be their best selves,
Yeah.
or even bringing change to the environment.
So it sounds like to me what you're saying is maybe those that don't have as many degrees, maybe they might fear showing up boldly or standing
Mhm.
boldly in their purpose because of the elitism that exists in your space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that I would say is a roadblock would just be, you know, accreditation
Hmm.
expectations for transfer. For example, if you're teaching a transfer level class, there might be certain things you have to do.
Hmm.
And, you know, sometimes that can limit just the process of learning.
I do want to actually fall back on the example that you gave earlier because you had this beautiful idea of a multicultural poetry course, right?
Hmm.
And initially it was a art course and it only focused on one part of the world.
Hmm.
And you did deal with a bunch of pushback. So in my mind,
Hmm.
it's like a potential roadblock in your space would be just dealing with pushback from getting things approved or having your
Hmm.
intellectualism questioned or declined, your ideas declined in your space as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And intellectual pushback is, I would say that that's probably the biggest one,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, because that comes before sort of having to adhere to the rules and things like that, because you have to have the conversation first before there even is change.
Yeah.
Even though the rules help us know what change is possible or not, sometimes you need to discuss, does this fall within the guidelines?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I have a story about that I'll share really briefly. I was in a meeting once, and we were being forced to teach this Holocaust novel, which I love the novel. It's a great book. Man's Search for Meaning, super cool. And it's funny because when I got my new job where I currently work, they were also teaching that book, although we weren't forced to teach it. So it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in the meeting saying, hey, is there a reason that we have to teach this? All the other writers and work that we're teaching is very European centered, and it didn't reflect the demographic of the students. I mean, at the college I was at the
Mm-hmm.
time, it was 85% international,
Okay.
and we maybe had 2% of students from Europe. All the other demographics were of color, and so I said, why don't we try to teach, Maya Angelou or Octavia Butler, and I was just naming these different writers of
Mm-hmm.
color, um, looking at Viet Nguyen maybe or Amy Tan, things like that, and someone raised their hand and said, hey, I'm not really a part of those cultures, and I'm not
Okay.
sure to handle the conversations that might be generated in class as a result of these different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at them and said, well, I'm not of European descent and I'm not of that culture, but you're still
Mm.
expecting me to teach this
And who
book.
was this? Some was it a student? Was it?
Well, it's a
Uh,
faculty member. So we were
okay.
in a meeting, a departmental meeting, and we were
Okay. Okay.
talking
Got it.
about curriculum changes and what we feel might solve some
Mm-hmm.
equity gaps.
Okay.
The issue we were having
Interesting.
was that students in the course where this book was assigned were struggling to pass the reading comprehension portion.
Mhm.
And what I was trying to propose was maybe the problem isn't a skill issue with reading. Maybe the problem is they don't feel connected to the work.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I remember when I was a student, there were some courses that I was so happy, or some classes rather, that I
Mm-hmm.
was so happy to attend. And I felt like I wanted to pay attention and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to absorb the information in a way that was sustainable and long lasting. Because with me, I used to be one of those students that would just study to get an A. I get an A. I had straight A's almost. But then I didn't retain a lot of the information. And then I think back about the things that I know today and the things that I did retain. It really had to do with the places that I felt seen and I felt heard
Mm-hmm.
and I felt visible. So
Yeah.
I love that. I would love to share some common blockers in business. Why do people not always show up boldly in their everyday lives when it comes to the business space? Really, the first note here is imposter syndrome.
Ooh, that's a
Have you
good
heard of
one.
that? How would you define it if you've heard of it?
I would define imposter syndrome as basically being prepared and equipped for something, but not believing that you're prepared or
Mhm.
equipped for something and feeling like you're in the wrong space, even though you're in the right space.
For sure. And I think that this shows up in so many areas in business, whether you're running a business yourself, whether you are supporting a business, right? Whether you are a employee at a business, whatever your position is. I can't tell you how many times I'd be in business meetings and someone would share something that they have on their mind. And the purpose of the meeting is for us to bounce ideas with one another, to share
Mm-hmm.
updates, things of that nature. There are some people that would say, I'm sorry, I just want to say, or I'm sorry, I just want to add, right? Or sorry to interrupt, or sorry, just want to add one more note. Why are you sorry? That's
Mm-hmm.
what we're here to do this, right? We're here to share our ideas on how we
Mm-hmm.
can either improve this business or hit this goal or whatever, right? We
Yeah.
all have a voice here and we all matter. So I have always thought in my head when I hear that, like, why are you sorry? Like, don't be sorry, just be. Imposter syndrome is a mental thing, right? You have the skills and experience to show up boldly, but maybe you fear doing so because you wonder, am I the best person to speak on this, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
something internally in your mind going on in those moments. And I think it's like a business form of anxiety, or like an
Yeah.
operational form of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the skills, you've practiced, you know what you're doing, but you might be
Yeah.
nervous to share, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
maybe of how others will perceive you, or elitism, right? Like you said earlier, like there's
Yeah.
so many people that have the skills to produce those results that boost learning outcomes, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
make people feel seen, heard, and included, but they don't do so because they're afraid they don't have the credentials. But that imposter syndrome is just kind of a figment of our imagination in this like social construct that we've all created as a society.
Yeah, for
And it's
sure.
crazy how that works. I would say that imposter syndrome is a blocker in business.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to share some tools soon when it comes to these blockers and how to overcome them. But in business, imposter syndrome, and that might fall into academia. It might be a blended thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I would love to add just politics.
Yeah, that's a big
Politics
one.
exists in the business space. And honestly,
Yeah.
I'm not a politician. I'm not a politician. Like, I just want to do my job. I want to do a good job at my job. And then I want to go home and then live my life, right? I don't know. I don't think I would be a very good politician because I'm in my field sometimes. But all that to say, like, politics does play a role in our business outcomes and showing up boldly in business, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to make the wrong person mad, right? They might be going through a hard year and might be projecting those issues out on other people. And you might not want to say the wrong thing
Mm-hmm.
to damage a relationship, right? Even though you're not solely responsible for the tumultuous environments, right?
Yeah.
That's like politics, right? There's so many things that are out of our control. So that shows up in the business space. And I think that's why so many people are afraid to set boundaries in the workplace, whether you're starting a new job and you're overworking just to, prove your value, that falls back into imposter syndrome, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, but even outside of just like business politics and corporate politics,
Mm-hmm.
systemic racism, social economic disparities, like you see us here. I'm
Sound
a
like a
black
politician
woman.
right now, man.
No, honestly, like I'm a black woman, you're a black man. So we do have a unique experience when it comes to corporate, when it comes to starting businesses, when it
Yeah, for
comes
sure.
to living our best lives. We have
Yeah.
a different like game plan that we have to follow, right?
Yeah.
There's certain ways that we have to present ourselves to be taken more seriously in our day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that for a fact because I've lived in so many different places with so many different people. And I've
Mm-hmm.
lived in predominantly white spaces, predominantly brown spaces, predominantly black spaces. I've moved around a lot, okay? So I think I can share my testimony that systemic racism and social economic disparities is a blocker of why some people don't show up boldly. Maybe they didn't see anybody in their community that took those risks, right? Or maybe they don't know what it looks like to show up boldly because they don't have that example, in their space. Or
Mm-hmm.
they fear making the wrong person upset, right? Or they're just happy to have what they feel like maybe is what they're deserving to have, unfortunately, because of what they know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole separate conversation for a whole separate podcast.
No,
But
that's totally true.
systemic racism and socioeconomic disparities plays a big role there.
Okay.
And lastly, I think that this is a point that falls in both of our different fields and in a variety of different buckets, but the desire to fit in. I despise the status quo, right? I always say challenge the status quo. I always say be your authentic self and you will attract what's meant for you. I'm big in my faith too, so you will attract what's heavenly divine in your life and what's supposed to be aligned with you. But you can only do that when you're showing up as your true self, right? Maybe you're not speaking your mind because the majority of the group thinks in this opposing way. So you have groupthink, right? In our society, sometimes it is more comfortable to fit in than to stand out. Some people don't want all that attention on them, right? Some people just want to live a simple life where their needs are being met and they're not challenging anything and they're not doing those things. So I would say common blockers in business and academia, whether it is credentials, whether it is elitism, whether it is imposter syndrome, all this plays a role in why some people don't show up boldly.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you shared this whole thing about, being afraid to not fit in and things like that. There's actually some research they did on that. There's this experiment done called the Asher Conformity Experiment. And basically, let's hypothetically say we've got 5 people in a room. 4 of them are in on the experiment. 1 of them is being tested. So they would display these lines on the board, and one of the lines would be shorter than the others, right? And then one would be longer a little bit, so on and so forth. And the person testing everyone would basically say, which of these lines is the longest line?
Okay.
So the 4 actors would intentionally all pick the wrong answer on purpose.
Okay.
So they would say, hey, this line is the longest line or the shortest line, whichever one it is, whatever is being asked. And then that person who was invited into the experiment would just pick the same answer, even though they knew it was wrong, because they didn't want to stand out. They didn't want to go against the group, even though it was very clear that this was not the right answer. And what they found was people are willing to be wrong, to conform, even when they have the right answer, as opposed to saying, hey, all of you are wrong. Actually, I'm not quite sure, how to say this, but this is the right answer.
Why do you think it is? Like, what do you think people are afraid of when it comes to saying the right answer when they know it's the right answer, but there's so many people that are selecting the wrong answer, right?
I think there's 2 things going on. One, maybe they just don't want to stand out, like you said earlier.
Okay.
They just kind of want to go with the flow. They don't really want to bring attention to themselves. On the other end, I think that it's about their confidence in their answer.
Yeah.
So them saying, oh, hey, this is the answer, and hearing everyone else say that's not the answer just leads them maybe to believe that they're wrong, even when they're right. And instead of exploring that, they just decide, hey, I'm just going to say what they say, and then I'll find out later.
There's something like there must be something wrong, right? Because everybody is saying this thing, right? So maybe there is something I'm not doing, or there is something that I'm not considering, right?
Has it ever happened to you? Have you ever been in a room and you're like, I know this is the answer, and then everyone else is saying something else, and you're like, oh, wait, is this the answer?
Yeah, actually, like in class, and everyone's saying the wrong answer, and the teachers at that time would let everybody have a
just
turn.
get the wrong answer
and I'm
out.
like, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to say anything because my answer is not even remotely close to anyone else's. And then they'll say no. The teacher would be like, actually, it's this answer. And then I was like, well, I just should have said it because I had the right answer. So yeah, I have had that situation. And this actually kind of blends into the next portion of the podcast where we talk about risks that come with showing up boldly. I think there are so many risks that come with stepping boldly in your purpose or showing up boldly. Even me, like leaving corporate, deciding I want to take my entrepreneurism more seriously, right? And really devote to that. There is so much backlash and opinions that I've received and things of that nature, but I feel strongly rooted in my purpose now. And I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. And I know that this is where I'm supposed to be, right? But that didn't come without any negative feedback. Maybe some people treating me different because I'm not like a corporate woman, like how I was once, like an employee in the software revenue space and things of that nature. Like, it's weird to see how your relationships can even change. But honestly, despite the risk of rejection, the risk of maybe being wrong, wrong, right? The risk of uh, standing out too much, right? When you might want to blend in certain aspects.
Yeah.
I still would say, and I would challenge every listener to step boldly in their purpose, because this is your life, and you are the author of your story, right? And this is your divine timeline. So how can you reach alignment if you're not true and authentic to what that purpose is? And in order to be true and authentic in your purpose, you need to show up boldly. And it's not easy, right? It's not easy to show up boldly. I used to be so afraid of confrontation. I would say I was super chill back then, but I don't know if I was just chill or I just didn't want to start any drama with anybody. But all that to say, I've learned things and tools along the way, which actually leads us to our final section of the podcast. What are some tools that we can share with the listeners or anyone watching today, how you can show up boldly in your purpose?
The number one thing is to be yourself. Authentically being yourself. Allow yourself to exist in the space, because that is very bold. A lot of times people put on this mask. And so I would say be your unapologetic, authentic self. Obviously, be respectful in the space.
Certainly.
But the first point of showing up as yourself connects to the second point, which is being present in the space as well.
Yeah.
You can't be present in the space if you're not yourself in the space, because you're not there.
Because who's there, right? We do roll
Yes.
call. Keara, Regis. Okay, but is Keara really here today?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And also being
A
present.
little bit of poetry for you, Regis. See, I got it.
And also being present involves speaking, if you're able to speak, or whatever communication looks like for you. Speaking isn't just limited, obviously, to verbal and auditory communication. I mean, speaking in all regards, right? Whatever type of communication that you use.
And also show up boldly in those small increments, and you practice and you practice and you practice, and you improve and you grow in your confidence as well. Whatever that may be needed in, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Claim your space, be present, use your voice, whatever that looks like to you, and just understand that you are in that space. You need to occupy it, especially in academia.
Yeah. And in business, like lean in, like know that you are deserving of where you're at. Take pride in that, work hard and work diligently, but remember, you're supposed to be where you're at. You deserve to be there, and present yourself in that way. Don't say, I'm sorry, I just want to add this point. No, don't be sorry, just be. And that's something I would say, have a language shift of how you talk to others and how you talk to yourself. I remember one lesson that we had in one of our comm classes is how to show up more confidently in speech and written communication as well. So there's a lot of people that will write in emails, I'm so sorry, I just wanted to circle back, or I just wanted to remind you, just wanted to know you're doing that. So I wanted to follow up on this, right? Or I wanted to remind you about that, right? And depending on the space, that will be taken very well, and you will grow your respectability in that space as well. So have that language shift, not only of how you communicate to others, but how you speak to yourself, right? Instead of saying, I don't know if they'll take me serious, say, I take myself seriously, so they will take me seriously. I know I'm where I'm supposed to be, right? Have that language shift. And lastly, I would say prepare to be challenged. And Regis, maybe you can add some notes on that one.
Yeah, so definitely preparing to be challenged. And as far as preparing to be challenged, that also includes expecting resistance.
Yeah.
When you're being bold, people are going to resist, whether they're just jealous that they didn't do what you did, or step up, or speak out, or whatever the case is, or they're just trying to gatekeep. And another thing is, make sure that you separate the feedback you're receiving from your identity.
Yeah.
I tell my students all the time, we're in class, right? And I'm like, hey, y'all all have different beliefs. Y'all are all from different cultures. Y'all don't have to be friends, but in this classroom, you're all students.
Yeah.
Right? I tell them, attack, ideas, not people, or discuss ideas, not people. We don't need to talk about our individual selves. We don't need to judge each other, but we can critically discuss ideas and whether or not we agree or believe in them. And in the workplace and in academia, it's super important because just because someone's saying, hey, this isn't being communicated in the most effective way based on best business practice does not mean that you're not an effective communicator. It just means there's a particular expectation in this space, so we're going to navigate it this way. Maybe if you were in a different space, whatever you did might be the best option. So just remembering, it's not personal. It's not about your identity. The feedback is typically rooted in some other realm other than
Yeah, and
yourself.
be willing to adjust where needed, so you can still show up boldly and finish what you started. Just like your example earlier, Regis, where you got declined when it came to your course that you were introducing to your college at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But you took the feedback, right? You implemented the changes, but you never gave up. You kept pushing back to have that course approved,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually it was approved. So be okay with taking feedback. Be okay with making small incremental changes and practicing, because showing up boldly and stepping boldly in your purpose is not something that comes easy to those that maybe haven't been doing that for a while, right? So be okay with, practicing, whether you are apologizing less in meetings, right? And you're just saying what you think, or whether you're speaking out, right? Or sharing your opinions more often, right? And showing people who you are in those spaces, right? Whether you're dealing with feedback that challenges how you think, be okay with that and just do it more. Like even in the
Mm-hmm.
relational sense outside of business and academia, you're
Yeah.
going to have conflict, right? With people that you care about. You have to be bold to have those tough conversations, because sometimes those are needed to just create a better environment between everybody that exists in the space, right? That being said, at Peoples & Co., we really do encourage community leaders and business owners to show up boldly and step boldly in their purpose.
And before we end the podcast, we want to leave you with two things. One, we're going to share some clips with some interviews from some folks where we went around the Santa Monica community and asked people how they show up boldly in their purpose. So definitely check these clips out here. And the other thing, as you watch the clips and we near the end of this video, we want to leave you with a challenge. Show up boldly this week. But the question here is going to be, how are you going to show up boldly this week as compared to all the other days that you've been going out and doing what you do best,
Love
which is
it.
be yourself. All right. So what are you
Awesome.
going to do different this week? Check out these clips. And hopefully you're inspired by one of them.
Hey everyone, my name's Keara Peeples.
I'm Regis Peeples.
And we're the founders of Peoples & Co., a growth agency that empowers individuals and communities to step boldly in their purpose.
We're going to be interviewing some folks today to see how they step boldly in their day-to-day lives and to see what it really means to be bold to them in general. Well, let's get to it.
Let's go. We're curious, what does it mean for you to show up boldly in your purpose?
To know that everything is going to work out.
Okay.
I guess.
Be able to do what you want and not be like shackled down by what you think others are or what they think about you.
Give yourself time to identify what that purpose is, sit in that, and then grow that confidence.
Persistence and perseverance, I think it's awesome. If you have a goal, you can accomplish it no matter what the barriers are, even if it's a language barrier, which it had been for me when I came over here. So you have to want and love, and you have to have a goal, and then you can achieve everything.
Exactly. You got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Don't get behind in your plan. Whatever you're planning, don't get behind. Stay.
Make sure that you're doing what you got to do.
Showing up boldly means showing up for students, advocating for students, for me as a tutoring coordinator, and being positive.